cities and communities.
Wonderful. We'll be recording all of the sessions, so please know that if you want to go back and listen to it or share it, you can do so. But thank you so much for joining us for our World Migratory Bird Day Shared Spaces, Creating Bird-Friendly Cities and Communities webinar. And what's next after this webinar on October 16th? We really want to bring this home to you and discuss how you can implement policies to protect birds in your community. And we have 4 excellent presenters who will be joining us for that webinar to talk about what they've done in their communities. Finally, on November 20th, we'll close the year with our World Migratory Bird Day closing celebration. We invite you to join that as well. It's a lot of fun. We bring in a number of our participants and our binocular winners and discuss our successes for the year. For those of you who are new, we're Environment for the Americas. We coordinate World Migratory Bird Day in the Western Hemisphere and work with our global partners to celebrate this globally as well. We are an international team with people coming from all over, and we also partner with other nonprofit organizations and federal governments and many different groups to help promote our words about bird conservation through World Migratory Bird Day. So thank you very much. Thank you to Miguel, who is our Latin American coordinator, and he is based in Venezuela. Environment for the Americas works to conserve birds and educate people about bird conservation and nature, and also to inspire the next generation of conservationists. We also do our own research and our own activities to help improve protection of birds and their habitats. And all of these goals are also the goals of World Migratory Bird Day. And Environment for the Americas was created because of World Migratory Bird Day to serve as its home. But our programs have grown and we do so much, all connected back to World Migratory Bird Day. One of the actions that we accomplish every year is to support bird conservation across the Western Hemisphere, and we do that by creating the education materials in multiple languages that groups need to teach their communities about the migratory birds that they may be protecting. So getting these materials out is quite an accomplishment. We're working on that right now, trying to get materials across Latin America for their fall events. And as you can see from some of the images, the people who participate can be adults, they can be children, but having the materials in English and Spanish or whatever language that are needed is very critical to getting the word out. We want to thank our sponsors for helping us with our actions. We wouldn't be able to do this without their support. We also have a number of individual donors, so thanks to all of you who have contributed to making World Migratory Bird Day and these webinars possible. Your support matters. If you are considering how you want to give this year, we hope you'll lend a hand to our World Migratory Bird Day efforts. You can sponsor a webinar. You can sponsor the translation, which is about $125 an hour. You can provide what we call a happy kit, which is one of these education packets for a school or for a community. And also donate flights for our participants and our coordinators who need to travel to visit sites and to learn more about all of our successes on the ground. And as you know, Migratory Bird Day has addressed a number of issues over the years. One of them is dimming the lights for birds at night. It has been a very popular topic. And when we did that theme a couple of years ago, it was so popular that a number of organizations adopted the slogan. They continue to use it, and it helped to motivate some of the actions that they continue today. That's what we hope for all of our conservation themes, and we know that the shared spaces theme has been equally popular and motivational. I want to thank our artist, Ana Maria Savarina from Mexico. She created this beautiful image of our program this year, and we illustrated the issue of light with the little light post back there. As you can see in this poster, it's very interactive, so you can see some of the other topics we've discussed, from cats to window collisions to native plantings. So thank you very much. Ana Maria did an amazing job with this art, and we love how interactive it is and how educational it is. But without further ado, I know you're waiting for our guest speakers, so I'm excited today to bring to you an amazing panel with Kyle Horton, Michael Rymer, and Stephen Hummel. We'll start with their presentations and then we'll move to questions, which you can deliver to all of them. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll go through and pull those for you and deliver them to our panelists, and they can answer them. Finally, we'll conclude by announcing our light pollution competition winners, and we have some amazing photos to share with you that were submitted as part of that competition. So thank you very much. I want to start with Kyle Horton. Kyle's been supporting our efforts through World Migratory Bird Day for a number of years now, and we really appreciate that every time we ask him to help us out, he's there enthusiastically. Kyle has a master's in wildlife ecology from the University of Delaware and a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology from the University of Oklahoma. He also was a postdoc at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And his doctoral work is his foundation, provided his foundation in meteorology, sparked his interest in using weather surveillance radar to study bird movements, which, as he says, blends atmospheric science with ecological inquiry. So thank you so much, Kyle, for once again joining us today and for being part of our work through World Migratory Bird Day and to promote bird conservation.
Thanks, Susan. Hopefully you all can hear me. And again, thank you for the opportunity to share. Let's see, I just got a notice. Unmute your microphone later. Okay. Can you just give me a thumbs up? You can hear me okay?
You are good.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks. And so today I just want to take a little bit of time, share my general love and admiration for migratory birds today, share a little bit of that diversity, how we study migratory birds, and then how migratory birds are interacting with lights at night. And you can go to the next slide, Susan. Thanks. And so throughout the Americas, there is no shortage of amazing diversity of migratory birds, some of which show up on the slides here. Again, these are birds, songbirds to shorebirds to waterfowl that traverse from North America well into Central and South America, traversing hemispheres. And so these migratory movements and birds connect, our communities near and far. When we think about migratory birds, you can go to the next slide. Bird migration itself is not an overly unique phenomena. Of all bird species globally, about 19% are considered migratory. When we think about birds that frequent North America, that number's a good bit higher. And so about 70% of all bird species that occupy North America are considered migratory. And then we have this unique question to ask. When do these birds actually migrate? Do they migrate during the day? Do they migrate at night? And when we actually look at that metric's quite a bit higher as well. About 80% of migratory species migrate at night. And so you can go to the next slide. This creates some issues, right? So birds have evolved to migrate at night under the cover of darkness, navigating by the stars and different topographic features. When we shine really bright lights at night, there's a well-established literature that migratory birds are typically attracted to lights like this in this video. And so at first glance, this looks like a bunch of insects flying around lights at night. I can assure you, it's almost exclusively birds and those colorful birds that just showed up in the previous photos. And so again, things like this are happening, maybe not at this magnitude, but they're happening all across the Americas. And so we have tools to study these movements. One thing that's challenging about these birds migrating at night is that they're migrating under the cover of darkness at high altitudes or high elevations up in the sky. And so we use tools just like this, as Susan mentioned in the introduction. We use these radar remote sensors. And so I always describe this as a sort of a golf ball sitting on a pedestal. And so that golf ball is the actual radar that scans the airspace all around it. It does this continuously. Every 5 to 10 minutes, we get new data. These are the same radars that if you turned on a local weather channel and you saw rain moving across the screen, those are usually detected by radars like this. We call them NEXRAD or Doppler radar. Again, there's a bunch of acronyms here. We don't have to go into that today, but this is what the radar actually looks like. Maybe a next follow-up question into the next slide would be, what do birds from a radar display actually look like? And so we're moving around geographies a little bit here. So I'll just sort of take you on a tour. We are now in southern Florida. There is a radar sitting on one of these small key islands in Key West, Florida. And what you're going to see is the animation is going to start. The sun is going to set, as we well know now. These birds are going to take to flight, moving through the cover of darkness. And you can see these birds lifting off of those islands, heading north, at least on this spring migration journey in 2023 in late April. And then right behind it, you're going to see another cloud of blues and greens. And those are birds that have lifted off of Cuba and are now making that northbound flight into the airspaces of the United States here. And so what these radars are detecting is not a few species, it's dozens and dozens of species migrating at night. And it's not a few birds, it's not tens of birds, it's not even hundreds of birds. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of birds that are migrating at night. You can go to the next slide. And so we can learn a lot from those data. These really build the backbone of what we can do for many different questions. And so one question we might ask, using how we can see the birds lifting off of the landscape, we could say, what are some of the drivers of where and when birds settle into a terrestrial landscape, those shared spaces that Susan was mentioning at the onset of today's webinar? And so we might say, okay, birds might be in a forested patch. They might be in an urban patch. As the sun sets, we can see the radar scanning the airspace, and we can start to see the signature from the ground show up in those airspaces. And so I'm not going to bore you with all of the details that go into this. There's lots of data, there's lots of information, but in the nutshell, we can start to build maps that look like this. And so this is a map of stopover density. The warmer the colors, the more yellow they are, the more birds are using that landscape. The cooler, the fewer the birds. And so we can see a lot of detail of what's driving migration. You can click to the next few slides. We can zoom into this area, and then we can learn a little bit about what's driving migration. Here we can see warmer colors showing up along some of those white lines. Those white lines, maybe to no surprise, are usually riparian corridors or rivers. So a lot of birds preferring that habitat. We've got a lot of yellow colors in the bottom right of this map here. As it turns out, most of those areas, you can click to the next slide, are mostly forest. And so we see a really positive correspondence between these migratory birds and habitat like forest. We see a negative association with where there's a lot of agriculture as well. So those developed spaces being less hospitable for migratory birds. But I haven't really touched on light pollution just yet, and we're about to get there in just a second. So you can go to the next slide. And so we've been able to take those maps and then turn them into a conservation product, really. And so we can turn this continuous scale map of migration density into what we call a migration hotspot map. So all of the red areas are actually areas that are really critically important for the passage of migratory birds. And so those are areas are where we would expect to see the most number of birds. And again, we've sprinkled these hotspots all throughout the United States. So it's not just one area seeing the greatest intensity. You can go to the next slide. And so we can bounce around the geography. Again, some of these areas might be more or less of interest to you, depending on where you're zooming in today. And so you can see these hotspots, and you might be able to guess, given an area of interest to you, what might be driving some of those hotspots. And you can click to the next slide. And so these data we make freely accessible. Anyone can download them, and they start to serve these conservation priorities of we've made them for Alabama or Arizona or really any state in the lower 48 states of the United States. And so we host these on my lab's website. They're in GIS repositories. And so anyone can have access to these. Again, sorry that went really quick, but I'll share a link. I saw it come through in the chat of how you can find these as well. And so just to jump to one of my last slides here. the punchline here is with these maps and with these models, we're able to say what really drives the migration here. And so you can click to the next slide, a few animations. We can see on this, what I'm showing you is the top 10 predictors of migration density across the US. We had about 50 predictors in this model. You can see the blue colors and their variables are positive predictors of migration intensity. So a lot of forest predictors here. Negative is red. Cultivated crops, for instance, are a negative predictor. Fewer birds in those agricultural areas. The punchline I wanted to share with you today is that the number two most important positive predictor here was actually sky glow or light pollution. And this is quite unfortunate when we're thinking about migratory birds. It suggests to us that those lights at night are having a strong impact on where those birds are settling into the terrestrial landscape. This was true in the spring, and we basically saw the same thing play out in the fall. And you can click through a few animations here, Susan. That isn't to say that land cover itself isn't a strong driver of migration. It's just showing us that you can click through the pie charts, that sky glow, this thing that we are modifying the landscape with, is causing some significant issues. You can click to the next slide. And so just really quick, some takeaways from this research. It looks like light pollution is attracting birds probably into urban areas, which are somewhat hazardous for our migratory birds, whether that's the lights, poor habitat, collisions with windows, exposure to cats. But we know some of the solutions can be, conducted by all of us. We can reduce lights at night. Those can reduce attraction, and it can reduce fatal collisions. And you can go to the last slide. And so at the first pass, the solution sounds easy. We have these lights on. We can flip the switch, turn them off. It just turns out that there's lots of switches and lots of different priorities for when we have lights on. And so you can click through the end here. And so while the solution is somewhat simple, in practice, it's hard when we have so many different priorities for lights at night. Reducing them is a challenge and something we'll continually work towards. And I think this will be a great segue into the following talks. Thanks so much.
And thanks so much to you, Kyle. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate, again, all of the contributions you've made to World Migratory Bird Day with excellent, this excellent information that you've shared. And our next speaker I'd like to bring up is Michael Rymer. Michael is well, Michael says that he was raised in Dallas, Texas, and that he seldom saw the night sky in its natural state. So, but later in life, he came to discover a love for astronomy and astrophotography. And again, you're seeing some of the most amazing slides you can because all of our panelists are apparently really good photographers. He enjoys hiking and he's a gardener and loves to spend time with his camera and telescopes. He joined the DarkSky Advocates Network in 2021, has a BA in journalism from the University of Oklahoma, and an MS in recreation and tourism and management from the University of Northern Alabama. So I'm really excited to have Michael on today. Michael, I'm trying to find your screen. Is your camera on?
It is.
Ah, there you are. Okay. I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Susan, and thank you everyone from Environment for the Americas. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about this issue that is very dear to my heart. As Susan said, I have an affinity for the night sky through astronomy. However, we at Dark Sky International recognize that this issue is not just about stars. In fact, some people may be upset with me when I say that stars are not the biggest priority that we have for fighting light pollution. There are so many ecological reasons for wanting dark skies. So today we're talking about birds, so let's save them. We want to reduce light pollution for our avian friends. Next slide, please, Susan. So Kyle mentioned light pollution, and we're going to talk about a couple of examples of what light pollution is here in the next couple slides. But light pollution is the human-made alteration of outdoor light levels from those occurring naturally. So any amount of light that we use outside at night is considered light pollution, even if it's used responsibly. Any light out in the environment is light pollution. So what we at Dark Sky International want to do is educate people and encourage everybody to use light better, to use it more responsibly. That way, we're reducing the amount of wasted light at night that contributes to light pollution. A recent study found that light pollution is increasing roughly 10% a year around the world, and 80% of the world's population lives under sky glow, which we'll talk about here shortly. And in the United States and Europe, that's an even higher number. So a lot of the world's population does not know what a naturally dark sky looks like. So sky glow is the dome of brightness that we're all probably familiar with, especially if we live in a urban environment. It's the inability to see the night sky as it naturally is because of the amount of light in the atmosphere. And so our atmosphere is not a completely invisible entity. It's a gaseous layers in our and above our sky, and so all the light that is shining up into the sky is reflected by the molecules in our atmosphere, and so we see that light kind of mirroring back to us at Earth, making it difficult to see the night sky, to see the stars, to see the Milky Way. The next type of light pollution is called glare. I'm sure a lot of people here are familiar with this, especially when you drive at night. Glare is light shining in your face. It's very uncomfortable and it can be dangerous, especially if you are driving, in that you can't really see where you're going. And glare doesn't just come from other oncoming vehicle headlights. It comes from billboards. It comes from bad streetlights or floodlights from buildings, other structures that shine into our face, and that's not necessarily safe either. So when we talk about light pollution, we talk about glare. This is a safety impact that we experience in our daily lives. And then finally, the third type of light pollution is called light trespass. Again, we all live somewhere and we likely have neighbors or a street light outside of our house where a light will shine into our homes where it shouldn't. That light should only light the property or the area in which it is intended. My front door does not need to be illuminated by my neighbor's lights. So this light trespass is definitely a problem for a lot of us who, try to get good sleep at home, or we just don't need to have light on coming into our houses. And we certainly want to be good neighbors and make sure that our lights are not going into adjacent homes, properties, and especially into wildlife areas if we live near one. Next slide, please, Susan. So, light pollution, of course, like Kyle talked about, harms birds. Artificial light at night disrupts birds' feeding, mating, and sleeping patterns, especially nocturnal migrations, which we just learned that a lot of species of birds migrate at night. And because of that sky glow that happens, every night that we have our lights on, these birds have a hard time navigating because that light is disrupting their flight paths. 80% of those birds take their journeys at night and they rely on the stars and natural darkness to navigate. So when we try to reduce light pollution, especially sky glow, we're helping our avian friends to move about, to do what they need to do, which they've always been naturally, adept at doing. Next slide, please. So, over billions of birds die annually from collisions. Nearly half of these happen at home. We think about collisions with high-rise buildings, large skyscrapers, but a surprising number do happen in residential areas. So, we have a lot of say in how we mitigate light pollution just where we live. So, I encourage everybody here to really kind of take a good look at the lighting that they use in and around their house. That way, we reduce the amount of impact that we have at home to help these creatures do what they need to do. Next slide. Turning off excess light is the way to do it. And Steven's going to talk more about the 5 principles for responsible outdoor lighting. But these principles are what we feel are the best way to reduce light pollution, using light only when necessary in a more responsible way. There are lights out initiatives across the United States. These several states here are ones that lead these kind of annual or biannual initiatives to encourage their cities to reduce the amount of light pollution at night during high migratory times. Of course, we want to try to make that 365 nights out of the year where we have this consistent behavior of reducing the amount of light we use. But you got to start somewhere. And so if you live in any of these states, or there's a state that I did not include here, please try to instill this initiative or help contribute to this initiative however you can, because these are doing a lot of good. And the more participation we get through these initiatives, the better off we're going to be in helping our birds. Final slide. So, our mission is to restore the nighttime environment and protect communities from the harmful effects of light pollution through outreach, advocacy, and conservation. A lot of our programs, of course, incentivize very good responsible outdoor lighting practices. So, if you're not familiar with us at Dark Sky International, please go to darksky.org to learn more. I saw some familiar faces here, so I'm glad to see friends from Dark Sky here on this call. Please follow us on any platform that you are comfortable with doing so. And again, we are very much united in protecting the dark skies, not just for the stars, but for the birds. So thank you all once again. I will turn it over to you, Susan.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that great presentation, Michael. We really appreciate it. And I know there are also some Bird City programs on here, so would love to have Bird City programs as you work through your criteria. You can join this program. That would be an excellent addition to your Bird City programs. Our next speaker is Stephen Hummel. He is the Dark Skies Initiative Coordinator with the McDonald Observatory, and which is part of the University of Texas at Austin. His work is focused on preserving dark skies in the Big Bend region of Texas and Mexico. And he worked to create the Greater Big Bend International Dark Sky Reserve, which is the largest area in the world certified by Dark Sky International. He's also an experienced astronomy and dark sky educator and a photographer. So once again, you're going to see some wonderful photographs as Stephen presents. So Stephen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Susan. Yeah, so the next slide. As mentioned, I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about responsible lighting practices for some of the solutions to the problem of light pollution, trying to reduce the amount of light going into the environment. Next slide. So I work at McDonald Observatory. We're an astronomical research facility in far west Texas, in the Big Bend region of Texas. We have some of the darkest skies left in the United States. It's my job to try to hold on to that as it's critical for astronomical research. But it's also critical for wildlife, which we'll talk about, as we've talked about today. So most of my job is on the ground trying to fix lighting, and the solutions, as mentioned, are responsible lighting practices. And there's five things. There's five steps to this. The first is kind of difficult to illustrate, but is just the purpose of the light, which is, do you need a light at all? Does it have to be there? And if so, it should have a clearly defined reason for existing, and not redundant with another source. The next step is shielding. So aiming the light down, shielding it so that it's only visible from the area you're trying to illuminate. It's not shining into a neighbor's property. It's not shining into the sky. It's targeted on the area you're trying to illuminate. The next step is the intensity of light. Oftentimes people think more light equals more visibility, which is more safety, but it doesn't really work like that, because after a certain threshold, your eye adjusts to the intensity and you don't end up seeing very much more, and the area around it looks dark by comparison. So you want a lower level of light. You want the appropriate amount of light for the task at hand. The next step is the color temperature, or the spectrum of the light. And generally, we prefer more on the amber or red end. It's better in most cases because it doesn't scatter as much in the atmosphere. The sky is blue because blue light scatters the most, red light scatters the least. And the last step is timing. Turning lights off if you don't need them, putting them on some control mechanism like a motion detector, or a timer, or some other means to limit the light only to when and where it is needed. All right, so that's it in theory. Let's see some real world applications. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, I work a lot with the surrounding communities in far west Texas, Mexico, and New Mexico on lighting design. So, here are some real world examples where we were implementing these steps. This is actually a outdoor resort space at a hotel in the area. And these are all targeted lights. They're all amber. They're all aimed down. They're not too bright. You can still see the stars above. So, you can walk out and still see the night sky and be under it and still see what you need to. And they're being very, very careful about where they illuminate and when. This is another great example from a public library. So this is a good example of a sign. You may see a lot of signs lit from below, angled up at the sign. Better way is mount on top and aim back down at the sign. Lower intensity, not super bright, but you can still see everything. Next slide. Here's a liquor store. This is a fun one. The owners asked me what would have the least possible impact while still having some light so you don't trip over the cactuses and stuff. Well, has the least impact, but I didn't think they'd actually do it, but they did. It was just kind of fun. So it's a look, right? But red light scatters the least. It attracts the fewest insects. It may still be visible to wildlife. It doesn't have no impact. But if you have to have light, then red is the least impactful color at low intensity. Next slide. Here's another example. You see a lot of these string lights everywhere. These are really common, really popular. All they did here was they shielded them up within the architecture. So they're not visible from outside or from above. A migratory bird flying above it would not see the light source because they're all within the awning of the structure. So that's another great practice. Here is an industrial facility. So I've shown you a few kind of smaller scale sites, right? But the nice thing about these practices is they scale. They go from small residential applications up to the very largest facilities. And as I go along, I'm going to show you progressively larger and larger, more complicated, more hazardous environments that are still able to do this. So this is a loading bay from a greenhouse. And you can actually see on the left, when I went to survey the lighting, there were actually warblers circling above the lights there. So they're doing that circling pattern, which I've highlighted in the arrows. So they replaced them with shielded lights. You can actually see better because there's no glare. The light isn't going into your eyes. It's all directed down to where you need to. They actually needed less light to get the appropriate amount of visibility than they did before, and it's better for wildlife in the environment. So this is an active loading bay. There are, occasionally going to be trucks and things coming up to this area at night or in the early morning. So they need to have some light, but that's dramatically reduced impact. Next slide. All right, so this is a map of the United States and Mexico showing light pollution. So this is from a satellite instrument called VIIRS. And this is a really fabulous resource, and maybe I'll link to it later on in the chat. But the whole world was mapped. But you can see that many of the major cities in the U.S. are pretty obvious. However, if we zoom in, on the next slide, there's one area in particular where I focus a lot of my work, which is called the Permian Basin. And this one stands out because it's not really a big city. There's a couple cities in here, Midland and Odessa, but they're not that big. In fact, in the United States, at least, this is one of the most light polluted areas per capita, meaning the greatest disparity between the amount of people that live there and the amount of light it produces. So, what's going on here is oil and gas activity mostly, and energy industry activity. So not just oil, but all of the associated industries with it, and even renewables too. Those electrical substations and things produce a lot of light. So this is the issue I'm trying to fix. This is an area that is important for birds, but it's even more critical for bats, especially around Carlsbad Caverns. And many bat species are similarly affected by artificial light at night and also can be migratory as well. Next slide. So this is what it kind of looks like up close. This is from Carlsbad Caverns. This is, a very famous cave in New Mexico. And looking out over that region, this is what it looks like. There's no city here. This is not an urban environment. This is entirely industrial activity. Next slide. So how do we fix it? Well, first of all, the issue here, of course, is an issue for bats and birds, as you may see them circling over facilities like this. Urban environments with lots of glass, when birds are attracted there, they tend to be at higher risk of collisions. But in this area, the biggest risk is simply exhaustion. Birds circling endlessly, becoming very distracted. All the time they're spending flying is very resource intensive for them. They get tired, and all that time they're spending circling is time they're not traveling on their way to their destination. So they may arrive too late, kind of miss the show, so to speak, by the time they arrive in their overwintering or summer grounds. Next slide. All right, so this is what a typical industrial facility looks like up close in the daytime, just so you get some context. This one is one we partnered with, along with DarkSky International and New Mexico Oil and Gas Association, owned by Franklin Mountain Energy. So these are the kinds of facilities that up close that we're trying to fix. There's a lot of hazards here. They obviously have safety concerns, and so they have a lot of light. There's a lot of tripping hazards, hazardous spills, and things. So obviously they take safety very seriously. However, we were able to work with them on the next slide to adjust the lighting to follow responsible lighting practices. And you can see if you flip back to the previous slide and back again, how much less light there is above. There's so much less light trespass leaving the property, and you can no longer see the sources of the lights from above. So a lot less light going up into the sky. All the light that's emitted is going to where it is useful. And it's also more amber color, so it scatters less and a lower intensity. So for this site, they actually reduced the energy cost by about almost 2/3, and the visibility, the sky glow it produced as viewed from 25 miles away was reduced by over 99%, so almost eliminated from far away. There's still a little bit of light. Again, they do have to have some light, but it's much, much better than a typical facility of that scale. So if all the facilities did that, it would make an enormous, enormous difference. Next slide. Here's another site built from the ground up to curtail all the light to the illuminated area. It's much more efficient to design it from the start. With that in mind, much more cost effective if you can, as opposed to retrofitting. But as lights burn out, they can be installed with DarkSky compliant lights at very little cost if you get them replace them as they fail. Next slide. Here's another site. This is near Balmorhea, which is a important spring, kind of an oasis in the desert of West Texas. One of the largest spring formations in North America is underneath this near this area. So it's an important migratory bird area, and they were able to design lighting again with dark skies in mind. Next slide. And here's one of the largest facilities we worked with. It's very large, but they use timing as well on certain areas that aren't in active use. They turn the lights off, and it's all shielded, all amber, so to reduce the impact. Next slide. And so here's an example of some timing and controls. Again, these areas are usually active at night, but especially if it's been around for a few months, they're maybe only there active for an hour or two at night. So on the newest facilities, we've been able to design controls in to eliminate most of the lighting most of the time and only keep the super critical emergency lighting on when there isn't anyone there, which is a huge, huge reduction in light pollution. Next slide. So these steps have actually they're not just promoted by us, but they've actually been endorsed by the energy industry, both in Texas and New Mexico, which is a huge win. And it shows that safety and security can coexist with these efforts. And if the oil and gas industry can do it, then anyone can do it, right? This is some of the highest thresholds for safety, the most critical of conditions. If things go wrong here, people die. And they're still able to implement these practices, which means that anyone can do it in any context. So with that, I'm going to wrap up, and I think we've got some time for questions.
Yes, we do. So what I will do is I'll pull down the slides and I'm going to highlight our presenters. And thank you so much to everyone. Great presentations, great slides. I can definitely tell that everybody is a photographer. So let me get everybody spotlighted here so you can see our presenters. If you have any questions that you haven't asked, put them in the chat again. Um, First question, and I'm not knowledgeable enough in this to know who to give it to, so I'll assume that you will grab it if you are the one that can answer it. 10% increase in light pollution per year. How is that measured?
Yeah, so yeah, I'll take it if you
Yeah.
don't mind. So this is results of a citizen science project called Globe at Night, and essentially that involved thousands of people looking up in the night sky and from all over the world and counting how many stars they can see from their location, and doing that over many, many years. So that's how the lot of the data was gathered. Um, so that was published a couple of years ago in a paper in I believe uh, either Science or Nature, one of the major journals. And I don't know, maybe Michael, you can pull up
I
the
think it
link
was
to it.
science. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a great study, and it filled in a lot of gaps. I showed an image from satellite view. The problem with the satellite view is that particular satellite is blind to blue light, which, as I mentioned, is the thing that scatters the most. So it's kind of the most impact. Whereas the human eye actually is much more sensitive to it at night. When the satellite view is actually kind of missing a critical part of it that citizen science can fill in.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen. A next question was how do you persuade people to dim their lights or to change their lighting? Especially the question came from someone who was asking particularly about the larger companies, but I think we should also consider, given that early chart that we saw where almost 50% comes from homes as well, how do you persuade your neighbors?
Yeah, I'll say for the larger companies, I mean, they leading by example is great. Once one company starts doing it, others are like, "Oh, interesting." They're getting good press out of this. They're leading in a good example. Others get interested. But the nice thing about this issue is it can be cost effective, right? If you design lighting well, you save energy and money, so there is an inherent benefit in there as well as the environmental impact. Michael, do you want to tackle the other
Yeah,
half?
and when it comes to talking to your neighbors, I know that can be kind of an intimidating thing. You don't want to tell someone how to, make their home the way you want it to be. So understandably, you want to use some caution with that. But I think most people, they're not aware of this issue, so they don't think about it. They just want to put a nice looking light on their home, to illuminate their backyard or front area, and that's sufficient. So they don't know that there's a better option. So I think going at it with kind of open arms and friendliness is really the way to do it. For the oil and gas, though, it was a very cool experience that Steve and I got to work with, in that they came to us, because they were aware of what we were trying to do, was specifically in New Mexico. And so we were fortunate enough to meet someone who was very in love with this idea of doing things right for Carlsbad Cavern National Park. So I think the incentive is out there. It's just a matter of getting the right people in the room and at the table.
Thank you, Michael. And Kyle, do you want to add anything in here?
No, I think they nailed it.
Okay, great. I have a question for you in a minute anyway. So, one of our partners from Mexico City, or one of our participants from Mexico City, has a question about how do you work with organizations who perceive lighting as a security topic? So many governments, they say, associate the implementation of lighting with crime or violence mitigation strategies, and this conflicts with dark sky proposals. So a safe neighborhood, which has been implemented with very bright LED lights, which have been installed every 2 to 3 meters, turns the city into a large reflective area. How can they convince governments to reverse those strategies?
Yeah, I can tackle the safety security side. So, Good lighting, designed well, can meet all safety and security requirements. But there's often, a false assumption that more lighting leads to less crime or more safety, and this is simply not supported by science. There have been many reviews of crime and lighting, and there is no real correlation between the two, like you would expect. In fact, more lighting in some cases can increase certain kinds of crimes, such as vehicle break-ins, because it actually makes the that you want to steal easier to see and find, and increases their awareness of a lack of witnesses. So, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, unfortunately, a lot of assumptions out there about lighting and crime that aren't really supported by the hard evidence. But if you're talking to your neighbor or something like that, citing a study isn't going to be very persuasive. Um, that my suggestion there is to show what good lighting looks like and demonstrate how it can be safe. Lead by example and let them see it for themselves, because that's often how people are really convinced, is actually seeing it in action.
Mhm. Yeah, and when it comes to policy, a lot of legislators, policymakers, their first the first people they go to when they hear about this issue is they'll go to law enforcement because law enforcement has a lot of say in how they define safety. And so, like Steven said, it's a matter of getting those groups involved and showing them that this type of lighting, this good, responsible lighting, is actually safer. And once you get law enforcement on your side, then you're golden for the most part. We have advocates down in Houston, Texas, who actively work with the Houston police departments to show them that lighting that does not present glare is safer. And there's been some anecdotal evidence showing of traffic accidents at night because of glare.
Yeah, that glare is a tough one.
Mm.
So a couple questions here from Rodrigo, who would like to know, and this is a big question. So, if lighting continues to increase or light pollution continues to increase at 10% per year, are there any projections for what impact it will have on biodiversity?
I can try to tackle that one. It's certainly a big question. Admittedly, we can probably project what some of the negative consequences will be. But again, modeling into the future, whether it's decades into the future, is certainly challenging. Comes with a lot of unknown and uncertainty. Again, we've seen a lot of evidence of what lights are doing to migratory birds. Again, when we talk about light pollution too, we try to be cautious that it's not a cure-all for reducing bird collisions as well, right? And so we try to advocate for reducing lights for birds, but also a tremendous amount of other wildlife that are disrupted. And so you could think of, bats being strongly affected, where it starts to fragment the nighttime sky, almost in the way that we fragment forests for the crossing of mammals, terrestrial dwelling mammals. Fragmenting the sky with light starts to cause issues for things like bats. It causes a tremendous amount of attraction for insects, and that can cause mortality, can cause challenges for breeding, the crossing of roads for different mammals. And so the general consequences look negative. There's not a tremendous number of positive impacts on wildlife from lights. And right now, the rates are just getting worse. And so trying to either, stabilize and hopefully into the future reduce light pollution is ultimately the goal of webinars like this, and trying to advocate for whether it's for perceived notions of safety to reduce that. Again, that's going to help wildlife, but then also helps a number of downstream things, energy bills, climate crises, etc. And I'll turn it over to my colleagues here as well.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
think
Yeah, I don't have anything more to add to that.
Yeah, I think you summarized it pretty well. I do want to touch on why it's increasing so drastically. Like 10% per year is very quick. That's very fast. That is more than population growth, right? That is way more than actually the sprawl of the city increasing every year. They're one of the reasons why it's increasing so fast is the kinds of lighting that are common now. Lighting is now cheaper and brighter than ever before. People think less carefully about using it because it's so cheap to operate. And it tends to be very blue rich as well, which scatters more, as I mentioned. So they're just until now, until last few years, people haven't really had any kind of real discussion about thinking carefully about lighting, right? It's just light is good. Let's put as much of it out there as we can. And only in the last few years, I think, has started to come around in understanding that, oh, maybe we kind of overdone it in some areas, thanks to conversations like this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for those answers. I wanted to ask one final one before we move to our competition winners for this session. Uh, the collisions group has been trying to come up with like an alternative form of glass that can be installed that hopefully one day we would see replacing the glass that we have out there that birds can't see. Is there any way to adapt lighting so that only lighting that is, you know, better for all of these issues related to light pollution is made available, or lighting can be adapted to reduce the glow and the glare and et cetera?
I'm
You
happy
want
to respond, but I'm
Go ahead.
happy to let light experts field the question too.
Yeah, I can tackle it. Yeah. So DarkSky International has, a list of approved products. And if you know what to look for, you can find some on your own. It's just a matter of knowing that you know exactly what to look for. There are, of course, products that are certified. I do also want to caution that just because it has a logo that's certified doesn't mean it's right for your application, right? That it can do no harm. You do have to think about the context and how you install the light. And again, go back to those five principles. It has a purpose. It's where it needs to be, when it needs to be, the right intensity, color, etc. So it can be a little overwhelming at first, but once you know what to look for, it's really not too difficult. Unfortunately, right now, I would love to be able to point at a certain brand and say just buy that. I can't endorse any specific product, but I think the best course of action is to uh, go to those five principles and follow that rather than try to find a product that says they know, because people try to sell you things. So yeah.
Yeah. And you can use the right product in the wrong way, like Stephen, like you said. So you got to be familiar with the principles behind the lighting itself. I put a link here in the chat to our dark sky approved lighting by use. So we have a database full of fixtures that we look at technical specifications for. It's not just the eyeball test of looking at something and thinking, yeah, it looks all right. We look at the technical specifications for these products, and they go through rigorous, review process. And so is a great place to start. Like Steven said, don't just take our word for it. Make sure that the fixtures that you're using are being used the right way too, because you can use something that is supposed to be efficient, but use it inefficiently, and it's still not going to help.
Mhm. Well, you have a lot more questions. You have a lot of invitations also to visit a number of conferences, workshops, the Kissimmee Prairie Preserve. So thank you so much to the participants today for all of your questions, for your enthusiasm, and for what I know will mean that you will be out there sharing this information with your audiences as well. I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to recognize our award winners. This has been a fun part of these webinars, which is that we invite everyone to submit their photos, and then they win a prize of the current topic. So the winner that we have right now is Joel Weatherly, who submitted this photo showing a great gray owl silhouetted by the aurora borealis during a moderate geomagnetic storm. So it was taken in the Beaver Hills Dark Sky Preserve, which he says offers excellent views of the night sky for humans and migrating birds. So thank you very much for sending in that photo. And then our second winner is Fernanda Damayanti Lopez Torres Leon from Leon, Guanajuato, Mexico, who has a photo of a brown booby in the moonlight. She, she says that this photograph could reflect the close relationship between the moon and marine life as it influences the dynamics of marine and coastal ecosystems such as tides, migrations, reproduction, and food availability. When you appreciate the moon, remember that it is important to us as it is to others. So thank you so much to both of you, not only for your photos, but for your beautiful words about the importance of dark skies. And then I want to remind you that coming up on Thursday, October 16th, we've got 4 great panelists who will do presentations on how they've implemented policies that benefit birds. These range from cats to windows. So we're really looking forward. We have representatives from Mexico, Canada, the United States. So I'm so excited to have those participants. And again, there's another competition. So if you have been able to implement a policy in your community, we hope you'll share it. We just want to hear what you've done. It's a very easy one. So just submit that on our competition page and you'll be considered for a prize. So we hope you can join us for that, as well as our final closing of World Migratory Bird Day 2025, which will include the announcement of the theme for 2026, which I know you're going to all be interested in as well. So thank you so much. We can cut the recording, and I appreciate you all, Michael, Kyle, Stephen, for joining us today and for your great work on this topic.